In the Revolutionary era, from about 1765 to 1783, American Army uniforms were remarkably different from British uniforms, despite the U.S.'s status as a British colony at the time. While the British sported a standardized uniform with a signature red coat made of thick wool called broadcloth and meant to intimidate opponents, American uniforms were not standardized due to the military primarily containing groups of militiamen. Their attire was varied, and occasionally it caused confusion on the battlefield. Once General George Washington took leadership of the Army, training and uniforms became more organized. Troops wore blue coats with various linings to distinguish their branches. Washington picked blue as the color for the colonial men for a few reasons, including distinction from the British Army, and practicality as the blue dye was relatively easy to produce in the colonies. The facings, or linings, of the coats indicated different specialties. Red indicated artillery, white for infantry, and green or yellow for other branches. Men also wore white or beige breeches and either leggings or gaiters, which were ankle coverings, to cover the rest of their legs. Finally, men wore tricorn hats to help with the weather and align with military fashion in other countries, especially France. As France joined the war and allied with the States in 1778, its influence increased. The traditional coat was replaced by popular French frock coats, which became the official military uniform after the war concluded. Similarly, the tricorn hat was replaced by the bicorn hat due to its practicality in later phases of the war. On bicorns were decorative knots or ribbons that showed support for one side or the other, called cockades, usually black and white on the colonial side to show allegiance with America and its French allies. Aside from further standardization, U.S. military uniforms changed minimally after the Revolutionary War and through the War of 1812. Despite soldiers using guns, officers continued to carry swords into battle around this time. The swords they carried were called American sabers because they were designed after a bald eagle's head, the symbol of America. Furthermore, the tricorn or bicorn hat was replaced by the shako, aka tombstone, hat. This uniform continued on until the Mexican-American War, where the shako was replaced by a more practical visor-style hat. At the start of the Civil War, military uniforms diverged greatly as the Confederate South split from the North. Union troops, called Federals, sported dark blue tunics and kepi hats. These hats came from a popular French style that migrated to the now not-so-United States. The Confederates diverged more significantly than the Federals. Confederate soldiers wore gray and earthy-toned uniforms to contrast themselves from Union blue. Some Confederate troops would flip their belts that read U.S. to read roughly S.N., presumably standing for Southern Nation. Troops frequently suffered from faulty muskets that were older and less effective due to their limited access to international trading ports in the Confederacy as well. After the Civil War and Reconstruction, the Spanish-American War began. Here, uniforms did not change drastically, but weaponry did. Soldiers carried Springfield 1873 model muskets, which were the first breech-loaded rifles in the U.S. Army. These guns were nicknamed trapdoor for this feature. Once again, military hats also changed during this era. The Montana peak design was adopted from far western territories due to its practicality. Finally, around this time, East Asian expansionist campaigns got more tropical-colored, lightweight uniforms to better adjust to the climate. This was expanded during Vietnam a few decades later. During World War I, American uniforms adapted to be similar to their British allies. Uniforms turned khaki or olive in color and had the signature Brody helmet, also known as the Doughboy helmet. Troops were outfitted with M1897 shotguns, which were often called inhumane due to the high number of casualties they caused by their trench-clearing abilities. From World War I to World War II and through World War II, uniforms finally fully shifted from formal styles to entirely functional styles. Uniforms were made out of cotton and herringbone to better align with climate needs. Soldiers also wore the first camouflage pattern, called frogskin, to battle for the first time in this war. Jackets got shorter and more fitted, and the Brody hats turned into M1 hats. In airborne Army troops, American parachute harnesses allowed the U.S. and Allies to land with guns on them, something the Germans couldn't do, which helped them successfully execute D-Day. Similarly, the Army Air Forces, which is now the Air Force, had signature wings after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which led them to then officially split into the Air Force branch. After World War II, military uniforms began to diversify more and adapted to each challenge more readily, though the overall appearance changed minimally. In Vietnam, uniforms were lightweight and had camouflage adapted to the tropical environment. Uniforms from this time were often characterized as very torn up and beaten up, as the harsh conditions caused uniforms of active soldiers to disintegrate quickly. Torn-up uniforms were seen as a mark of veterancy and experience within the military. In the Desert Storm Gulf War, the emergence of a lighter camouflage appears for the first time, which would continue to be one of the two main types of camouflage worn by soldiers. In 2004, the military adopted the Universal Camouflage Pattern, also known as the UCP, in an attempt to consolidate the two patterns of camouflage into one pattern that works for all environments. This program continued for 10 years before it was phased out due to its consistent failures. Today, uniforms consist of a coat and trousers with the operational camouflage pattern, the OCP, instead of the UCP, to allow for the most efficient camouflage and the best success for our army abroad.